Welcome to the first podcast by the Safe Technology Advocates. We are here to discuss our research, and I'm your host, Christopher Smith, along with Eli Hernandez and Aaron Streit to join me in this discussion.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
It's great to be here.
Now, we're here to talk about the issue that we've been investigating for some time now, AI and its use in self-driving cars, also known as autonomous vehicles.
Granted, AI, specifically in self-driving cars, has improved dramatically over the last decade and has massive potential in the future. It could potentially eliminate the nearly 1.25 million deaths caused by car accidents each year.
That's a good point, but I think the technology just quite isn't there yet. There's still many issues that plague autonomous vehicles and have caused many problems in the past.
Absolutely.
Yep. So, as we've discussed, we've separated these issues into four separate distinguishable groups. Those being accidents that have been caused by autonomous vehicles, detection issues with autonomous vehicles, the lack of trust with autonomous vehicles, and the legality surrounding autonomous vehicles.
In the past, companies have really been too hasty putting these vehicles out that they have neglected to think about the cost that failure really means. Because if you think about it, with the sensitivity in the field of self-driving cars, deaths can happen. People's lives are at stake, and that's something we really have to think about. And these companies, they're able to swipe any accident or lawsuit that's thrown their way under the rug because you know how massive they are, and they will continue to put out these unsafe, untested vehicles. It's a money grab in some ways.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because of that issue, Aaron, I believe it's very necessary to implement strict regulations on the use of AI, similar to how the FDA regulates drugs and the food industry, and also medication. AI affects just as many lives and needs to be regulated by the government at that heightened scrutiny and level.
Absolutely.
Yeah, AI technology is just getting to the points that it can't be untested and untreated any longer. But on to the issues that we did mention, the four categories. Moving on to those, I'll let Aaron talk about the crashes and the data surrounding that.
So first up, the accidents that have been caused by faulty AI or detection issues. The biggest one to memory was the 2018 Uber car crash, and this has been touched on in the website and other spots a little bit, but I'm going to really delve into some of the details. So Uber has the self-driving car in Arizona, and as mentioned in the website, Arizona has very lax regulations regarding the testing of AI vehicles. I remember one site even saying that they would be open to letting AI cars test without a human driver in the car. And that is something that cannot be allowed under any circumstances. And then even though when the crash happened, Elaine Herzberg was on her bicycle crossing the street. This Uber car was driving about 40 or 50 miles an hour down the road, and it registered that it saw something in the street, but it didn't register that it was a pedestrian. And then it continued and got closer and closer, still registering that she was there, but it never once initiated the braking system because it didn't recognize what it was as a pedestrian. And Elaine Herzberg, was struck and killed at 40 miles an hour. So it wasn't even close to braking at all. And then there was a person in the car at the time, which was really the most shocking part because it was so easily preventable. But one of the things that came out later, they examined her phone, the person that was supposed to be watching the vehicle, and they found that she was watching Hulu half a second before the crash happened. So Uber not hiring qualified individuals to monitor these AI cars was obviously a major issue, and it caused the death of someone that was completely innocent and did not have. This situation was completely preventable, and that's what I found, and that's what most websites said, that it was completely preventable. And then additionally, on top of that, according to a couple websites, Uber had ignored several warnings from their software engineers about some of the issues, and they continued testing. Had the government been regulating this stuff, when they saw that testing or the software was not great, they should have immediately stopped testing, improved the software in a controlled environment where people aren't going to get killed. That didn't happen, and a life was lost. So, and then in total, there have been 5 other fatalities caused by detection problems, and this is on the level 2 fatalities. The Uber crash was a level 3. So Chris will talk a little bit more about the level 2 fatalities.
For context, level 3 and level 2 refer to the amount of automation that is in a vehicle. Level 3 is where the vehicle has control of the vehicle, where it's able to control acceleration, deceleration, and steering, but it is up to the human to monitor the environment. Level 2 is almost reversed, where the car or the vehicle is able to monitor the environment and detect and react to the environment, such as an autopilot system. Not quite necessarily controlling the car, but it is assisting the driver. Now, on to the level 2 fatalities that were caused. There have been 5 in total, where in 2016, in China, in 2016 in Florida, and in 2018 in California, were all caused by a Tesla Model S autopilot being activated. And this is the same system and same technology in all 3 cases that has been shown to be faulty, and through the years it has not been fixed to the point that it has caused 3 fatalities that should have been easily fixed. The other 2 occurred in 2019 in Florida, and also in 2019 in Florida. Those were by Uber cars. Those were in.
We'll just cut this part
Yeah,
out.
no, do something later.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Moving on. Yeah, me personally, just thinking another issue is weather. You see a lot of the commercials advertising self-driving cars now, and it's never ever raining or snowing and bad climate conditions. It's always sunny. And so how would the sensors be able to keep up with the 24/7 detection it needs to operate? My car personally has sensors that beep when I get close to objects, but in bad weather, such as snow especially, or even bugs sometimes, when they cover the sensors, the car will beep and believe something's there when something's not there. And one of them has actually broken for me personally, and I do not have a sensor on one side of my car. So if those sensors are not always working perfectly, how would a car be able to navigate the roads? And then also in the event of flooding or mass snowfall, if roads are covered and lines are covered, would the sensors still be able to detect the general guidelines of the road, or would a car simply stop working and a person be stranded, or the vehicle, worst case, drive off the road and crash? So that's my point there.
Absolutely. And one thing that I want to say on that is these are questions that haven't been answered, because I look for these answers and it just lists the questions. Like, this is an issue with self-driving cars, but no one really has the answer. So that's something that needs to be answered before they're used widespread.
Yeah, companies haven't decided what to do on that subject, so they haven't released the data for it.
Absolutely.
They don't want people to know that they have a discrepancy in what they're doing. So they hide that from the consumers in order to maintain a flawless track record of sorts.
Yep.
Another issue that AI detection does have is detecting people with darker skin tones. And this is obviously a large problem because a large portion of pedestrians on the road and streets are at risk of being completely ignored by the detection system. They are at risk of being ran over or at most being killed by AI that is unable to see them properly as they would somebody with a lighter skin tone.
Yeah, obviously, huge issue. And then a similar issue with the detection applies to kangaroos specifically, kangaroos and then also animals in general. So in Australia, detection of kangaroos has been an issue. Most systems use the ground as a reference point, but kangaroos are commonly hopping, obviously, meaning the system struggles to tell how close these animals are. And it only impacts Australia, but you got to think, what about animals? I mean, they're having a hard time detecting people with darker skin tones. What about deer? Or even horses? Like we have the Amish around this area. How are they going to detect horses? And especially because a lot of horses are darker colored. So these are all things that need to be answered, and the software is so extensive, and it needs to be very, very specific and constant updates, and it's just something that's a real issue right now.
And moving on from that, I think our final issue stems from the fact the detection system does not have the ability to make choices. So take the example of a self-driving car veering to avoid a pedestrian in the middle of the road. The system may have avoided the pedestrian, but it may also have veered into a different obstacle, such as a wall, another vehicle, or even another pedestrian. Current detection systems can only react to one obstruction, which is an issue in a world where a multitude of factors affect how a driver controls the vehicle. So I think that's pretty big.
That is a rather large issue. Now, moving on to the next issue that we mentioned is a lack of consumer trust in the technology. When it comes to self-driving cars, most people are not so receptive to the idea of letting another system control the vehicle, of them losing complete control of how they react to the world around them. And according to a recent survey, over 90% of consumers have had some concern with the technology, whether it be that they wouldn't feel safe in a self-driving car, they would want to be in control of the vehicle at all times, or they wouldn't trust it in mixed traffic. They might even have concern that the vehicle could be hacked, which is a large and real probability in today's modern age. Now, half the participants also shared at least 3 of these concerns. This is indicative of how people feel about the technology right now, and that affects how it's going to be received in the future, whether that be regarding its market shares or otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, we have these concerns, and how are we supposed to make decisions on if we want to actually purchase this if companies aren't releasing their data that they should be, which is another issue. We really don't have a lot of statistics and data for self-driving cars and the testing, and that's something that's got to improve. The last issue we pinpointed is the legal responsibility of autonomous vehicles. An unanswered question still is who gets the blame for an accident involving a self-driving vehicle, the driver or the company who manufactured the car. Even if a car can perform perfectly according to road laws, it can still make mistakes that have ambiguous consequences. And then once self-driving cars enter the public scene in mass production, manufacturers can expect a good portion of lawsuits they wouldn't normally think of with getting traditional vehicles. And these are questions that have to be answered by the government. They need to think of many different situations and just come up with a solution before self-driving cars are ready for purchase. So,
Yeah, having an add-on to traditional road laws regarding self-driving vehicles would be highly beneficial in creating a regulation system.
Yeah,
that really ties into my final conclusion here. I think for all of us is 3 potential solutions. I believe the first, not diving into this technology as a consumer right away without a lot of research and data and history of it being safe. You're potentially putting yourself and others at harm if you dive right into the technology. Secondly, consumers should also start requesting more information and data and research from these companies such as Uber and Tesla and Waymo about what they've come up with, the conclusions, and how truly safe these vehicles are and how reliable they are. And our third solution is informing the public and asking you to lobby to the government for stricter regulations to come up with a agency or program similar to the FDA that would regulate the use of AI and these self-driving cars, and to see laws passed and a set ground of rules for these cars on everyone's public roads and safety.
Specifically with lobbying politicians, I think the best way to go about it would be lobbying the NHTSA specifically, which is the National Highway Traffic Safety Association. They are responsible for making the laws for most traffic incidents and general highway procedure. So if you go about contacting them, I think you would get the best response.
Mm-hmm. And also, we need to get our politicians to write and sponsor bills, tightening up these regulations. The last thing we want is more injuries or deaths, and we honestly do want to see the technology improved. We just want to see it done in a controlled and safe way.
I think that about concludes this podcast for us. Thank you for joining us this time. We hope to see you next week.
Thanks, Chris.